the dessert case at the front of every American diner used to stop you cold. Before the hostess even picked up a menu, your eyes were already locked on that rotating stand of cream pies and layered puddings, each one sitting under a glass dome on a paper doily. These were not afterthoughts. The pie was the reason half the regulars walked in, and the cook who baked it before the lunch rush knew that. Number 19 on this list was so light it barely held together on the fork, and every diner from Connecticut to Ohio kept one in that case. And the dessert at number 4 is the one they used to set on fire right at your table until diners stopped making it because nobody wanted the liability. These were short-order desserts baked by cooks who worked the griddle and the oven in the same shift, and one by one they slipped off the menu. Here are 30 famous diner desserts that have faded into history. Number 30, Grape Nuts Pudding. If you grew up in New England, your diner had this on the menu every single day. Grape nut cereal soaked in a mixture of eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla, then baked until the top turned golden and the inside went soft and custardy. The cereal lost its crunch entirely and became something closer to a warm, sweet porridge. Diners served it in small oval dishes, sometimes with a spoonful of whipped cream. It cost almost nothing to make, which is why it showed up at every lunch counter from Vermont to Maine. Today, you would have to drive for hours to find a diner that still pours this into a baking dish. The cereal survived. The pudding did not make the trip. Number 29, Prune Whip. Stewed prunes folded into beaten egg whites and baked until the top puffed up like a soufflé. The texture was somewhere between mousse and meringue, light enough that it trembled on the plate. Diners in the 1940s and 1950s listed it next to the Jell-O and the rice pudding, and it sold well because it was cheap, sweet, and people actually liked prunes back then. The word prune became a punchline sometime around 1970, and once that happened, no diner owner was putting it on a chalkboard. Some cooks added lemon juice to cut the sweetness. Others folded in chopped walnuts. The whole dessert vanished the moment prunes lost their reputation. Before I go any further, for the folks who want more classic recipes like the ones I am covering today, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. It is available on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. This is the only time I will mention it. If you want it, it is there. Now back to the list. Number 28, Junket. A milk pudding made with rennet tablets that turned warm milk into a soft, barely set custard. You dissolved the tablet in warm sweetened milk, poured the mixture into glass cups, and let it sit on the counter until it firmed up just enough to hold its shape. There was no cooking involved, no stove, no stirring, no heat after the milk was warmed. The texture was so delicate it collapsed if you touched it with a spoon. Diners served it cold with a dusting of nutmeg on top, and children loved it because it felt more like eating flavored air than eating pudding. You can still buy the tablets today, but the knowledge slipped away. Younger cooks never learned it. Diners dropped it from the menu because nobody ordered it anymore, and a whole generation grew up without ever hearing the word junket. The dessert did not vanish because its ingredients disappeared. It vanished because the people who knew how to make it stopped passing it down. Number 27, Nestle Road Pie. A chestnut cream pie with rum-soaked candied fruit folded into Bavarian cream filling, poured into a chocolate crumb crust. In New York City, this was the dessert. Diners and delis across the 5 boroughs ordered it by the caseload through the 1950s and 1960s. The filling was dense, sweet, and heavily spiced, with bits of maraschino cherry and citron scattered through the cream. When the bakeries that supplied it closed one by one, the recipe did not transfer. By the 1980s, the pie had vanished from menus in the city that made it famous. People who remember it still talk about it like something that was stolen from them. Number 26, Brown Betty. Sliced apples layered with buttered breadcrumbs, brown sugar, cinnamon, and a squeeze of lemon, then baked until the top crackled and the apples underneath went soft. This was not apple pie, and it was never a cobbler. The breadcrumbs gave it a texture between stuffing and crumble, and the whole thing came out of the oven smelling like a church kitchen. Diners served it warm with a pour of heavy cream or a scoop of vanilla. The name goes back to the 1860s. and for a century it held its place on the dessert menu. Then pie won, and Brown Betty quietly stepped aside. Number 25, Charlotte Russe, a sponge cake shell lined with ladyfingers and filled with Bavarian cream, topped with a maraschino cherry. In Brooklyn, pushcart vendors sold individual Charlottes in small paper cups for a few cents, and kids treated them like ice cream cones. You pushed the cake up from the bottom and ate it in layers. Diners across New York kept Charlotte Russe as a light dessert option, and the combination of cold cream and soft cake made it popular in warm weather. By the 1970s, the pushcarts were gone, the lunch counters were closing, and Charlotte Russe became a word your grandmother used that nobody your age recognized. Number 24, Indian pudding. Cornmeal cooked slow with molasses, milk, butter, ginger, and cinnamon until the pot turned into something thick, dark, and fragrant. This was one of the oldest desserts in American cooking, older than the country itself. The cornmeal came from native crops, the molasses came from trade ships, and the combination worked so well that New England diners kept it on the menu for 200 years. Some served it with a scoop of vanilla ice cream that melted down the sides into the warm molasses. The pudding needed hours in the oven, and that is exactly what killed it. When diners started switching to pre-made desserts, anything that needed 3 hours of baking time was the first to go. Number 23, Floating Island. Soft poached meringue sitting on top of a pool of cold vanilla custard sauce. The meringue was shaped with 2 spoons and dropped into simmering milk until it puffed and set, then placed on the custard like a cloud on a yellow lake. Diners charged next to nothing for a bowl, and it gave the case something that was not brown or covered in crumbs. When menus shrank in the 1970s, Floating Island was one of the first cuts because it could not survive sitting under glass. It had to be made fresh, and fresh was becoming a cost nobody wanted to carry. A dessert that could not wait was a dessert that could not survive in a world that stopped paying attention to the kitchen. Number 22, Marlboro Pie. Grated apples mixed with sugar, eggs, cream, nutmeg, and a splash of sherry poured into a pie crust and baked until the top barely set. This was not a chunky apple pie. The filling was smooth, almost like a custard with a faint apple flavor running through it. Marlboro pie dates back to colonial New England, and diners in Massachusetts and Connecticut served it well into the 1950s. The sherry gave it a warmth that regular apple pie never had. But as apple pie became the default American dessert, everything that tried to be a different kind of apple lost the competition. Marlboro pie needed fresh apples, real cream, and a cook who knew how much sherry to pour without turning the whole thing into a cocktail. That was 3 requirements too many for a diner in a hurry. Number 21, Biscuit Tortoni. Crushed amaretti cookies folded into sweetened whipped cream with a splash of rum, spooned into small paper cups and frozen. Italian-American diners served these alongside espresso, and the combination of almond, cream, and cold sweetness made them the kind of dessert people ordered even when they were full. The paper cups went into the freezer in rows, and a diner could have one on the table in 10 seconds. No plating, no heating, no sauce. The rise of commercial ice cream in every flavor pushed Biscuit Tortoni off the menu by the late 1970s. Something that required handwork could not compete with something that came in a 5-gallon tub. Every diner used to have a person who made the desserts. Not a pastry chef with a certificate on the wall, just a cook who came in early and turned on the ovens before anyone else clocked in. She mixed the puddings, rolled the crusts, and set everything in the case before breakfast was over. The dessert case was her signature, and regulars knew her by what she baked, not by her name. When diners started buying pies from distributors and puddings from boxes, that person disappeared. The desserts got cheaper, they got more uniform, and they stopped being the reason anyone sat down at the counter. Number 20, Butterscotch Pudding. Brown sugar melted in butter until it darkened, then cooked with milk, egg yolks, cornstarch, and vanilla into a thick pudding that tasted like something between caramel and toffee. Diners served it in small glass dishes with a swirl of whipped cream, and the deep amber color caught your eye from across the counter. Real butterscotch pudding needed constant stirring because the sugar could burn in seconds. The instant pudding companies replicated the color but never the flavor. Once the boxed version hit shelves, diner owners stopped making the real thing, and a generation grew up thinking butterscotch was supposed to taste like powder and food coloring. The real thing needed a patient hand and a heavy-bottomed pot. The fake thing needed a spoon and a bowl of cold water. Number 19. Chiffon pie. This was the dessert that made people put down their forks and wonder how something so light could hold together on a plate. Chiffon pie started with a flavored custard base, lemon or chocolate or pumpkin or strawberry, and then the cook folded in stiffly beaten egg whites until the filling became a mousse that barely weighed anything. It went into a pre-baked pie shell, and the contrast between the crisp crust and that trembling filling was what made it special. In the 1950s and 1960s, chiffon pie was one of the most popular diner desserts in the country. Luncheonettes in the Midwest listed 3 flavors at a time. Diners on the East Coast rotated them with the seasons: lemon in summer, pumpkin in fall, chocolate year-round. Roadside stops in the South served a peach version during July and August. Every cook had a personal ratio of custard to egg white, and the best ones could tell when the filling was ready just by looking at it. The technique was what killed it. Fresh eggs separated by hand, whipped to stiff peaks, then folded into the custard so carefully that the air stayed trapped. Fold too hard, and the filling went flat. Fold too little, and you had streaks of raw egg white through the pie. When diners shifted to pre-made pies from wholesale distributors in the 1970s, chiffon was the first casualty. There was no boxed version. There was no frozen shortcut. It was a dessert that existed only when someone stood at the counter and beat those egg whites by hand, and that someone was vanishing from the American diner one kitchen at a time. The filling barely held its shape on the plate. The tradition that made it held together even less. Number 18. Chouflé pie. Molasses poured into a pie shell, topped with a crumb mixture of flour, brown sugar, and butter, then baked until the bottom turned sticky and the top went dry and crumbly. The name came from the flies you had to shoo away from the molasses while it cooled. Pennsylvania Dutch families made this for generations, and every diner between Lancaster and Reading had a version in the case. The wet bottom style kept the molasses layer gooey beneath the crumbs. The dry bottom baked the whole thing through until you could pick it up with your hands. It was sweet enough to make your teeth ache. Outside of Pennsylvania, most people today have never heard of it. Number 17. Bread pudding. Stale bread torn into chunks, soaked in eggs, milk, sugar, vanilla, and cinnamon, then baked until the top turned crispy and the center stayed soft. This was the dessert that turned yesterday's waste into something worth ordering. Diners loved it because the main ingredient was free. Some cooks added raisins. Others poured a whiskey sauce over the top that turned the whole thing into a celebration. The simplicity was the whole appeal. You did not need a recipe. You needed stale bread, a few eggs, some milk, and the common sense to pour everything into a pan and let the oven do the work. That appeal died when diners stopped baking their own bread and switched to sliced white loaves that did not have the heft or the texture to hold up in a custard bath. Number 16. Custard pie. Eggs, milk, sugar, vanilla, and nutmeg poured into a pie shell and baked at low heat until the filling set into a smooth, jiggly surface. This was the plainest pie in the case and one of the hardest to make well. The crust needed blind baking first, or the bottom went soggy. Rush the custard and it curdled. Underbake it and the center never held. A perfect custard pie trembled when you moved the plate, and the flavor was nothing more than sweet cream with a whisper of nutmeg. Diners stopped making it because perfection in a plain dessert does not sell the way chocolate does. Number 15. Grasshopper pie. A frozen pie made from crème de menthe, crème de cacao, and whipped cream poured into a chocolate cookie crumb crust. The color was a pale, minty green that stood out in the dessert case like nothing else. It tasted like a mint cookie turned into ice cream and frozen inside a pie shell. Diners in the 1960s served this as the fancy option, the one you ordered when you wanted to feel like you were somewhere more expensive than you were. When frozen dessert pies fell out of fashion and menus tightened, Grasshopper pie disappeared along with every other dessert that needed dedicated freezer space. Dessert at a diner was never just about the food. It was about the extra 15 minutes. You had already eaten, you had already paid in your head, but you ordered the pie because it meant you could sit a little longer, watch the cook work the grill, let the coffee go cold while you scraped the last bit of filling off the plate. The diner sold that time, and the dessert was the excuse to buy it. When the pies came from a freezer truck and the puddings came from a box, the food was still sweet. But the reason to linger walked out the door. Number 14. Pineapple upside-down cake. A cast-iron skillet lined with butter and brown sugar, layered with canned pineapple rings and maraschino cherries, covered with yellow cake batter, and baked until it firmed up. When the cook flipped it onto a plate, the pineapple rings sat on top, glazed in dark caramel that made the fruit look like stained glass. The recipe came together in the 1920s when canned pineapple became widely available, and by the 1930s it was a fixture at church suppers, potlucks, and diner counters across the country. The cast iron was essential. It conducted heat evenly and created the caramelized layer that became the top when the pan flipped over. Diners served it warm with vanilla ice cream, and the combination of hot caramel, tangy pineapple, and cold cream was the kind of thing people mentioned on the drive home. The technique was where it got difficult. The cake needed 40 minutes of uninterrupted baking and had to be flipped while still hot. Wait too long and the caramel glued the fruit to the bottom. Flip too early and the center collapsed. The brown sugar had to be packed tight or the glaze came out thin, and the pineapple rings had to sit flat or the batter pooled unevenly. Every cook who made this dessert learned the timing by ruining at least one. The first flip was always a disaster. Cake stuck to the pan, caramel pooled on the counter, pineapple rings sliding off the top in a heap. But once you got it right, once you knew the exact moment to turn that skillet over, you had the most beautiful dessert in the case. When diners stopped baking from scratch, pineapple upside-down cake became a home recipe, and the cast iron went back to cooking eggs. Nobody flipped a cake in a diner kitchen after the mid-1980s. Number 13. Lady Baltimore cake. A white layer cake filled with a mixture of raisins, figs, and pecans, covered in a boiled white frosting that looked like fresh snow. The cake came from the South and carried a name that made it sound like old money. The filling was the surprise. You expected plain white cake and got a dense, fruit-studded layer that tasted like holiday baking in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. Tea rooms and diners in the Carolinas and Georgia served it through the 1960s. The boiled frosting was the hardest part because the sugar syrup had to hit the right stage before being beaten into egg whites. When that skill left the kitchen, the cake left the menu. Number 12. Tapioca pudding. Small pearl tapioca cooked with milk, sugar, eggs, and vanilla until the beads turned translucent and the pudding thickened. Those soft, slightly chewy pearls floating in custard gave tapioca a texture that no other pudding could match. Diners served it cold in glass dishes, and it was one of the cheapest items on the menu. People either loved it or called it frog eggs and refused to touch it. The instant version came in a box and ruined the reputation by turning the pearls into paste. After that, anyone under 40 assumed tapioca was supposed to taste like wallpaper glue. Number 11. Jell-O Parfait. Layers of flavored gelatin and whipped cream stacked in a tall glass so you could see every stripe of color through the side. Strawberry and vanilla, lime and cream, orange and lemon with a cherry on top. Diners used these the way florists use window displays. They sat in the case looking like stained glass, and people ordered them because they were beautiful before they were delicious. The gelatin had to be set in stages, one layer at a time, each one chilled firm before the next went in. When gelatin desserts started to feel old-fashioned in the 1980s, the parfait glasses went into storage and never came back out. Number 10. Sponge cake with strawberries. A slice of plain sponge cake topped with macerated strawberries and real whipped cream. Nothing else. The cake was baked that morning. The strawberries were sliced and sugared until they released their juice, and the cream was whipped by hand. Diners served this from May through September, and the quality depended entirely on whether the berries were ripe. When they were, this was the best thing in the case. The diner version died the way most simple desserts died. Supermarket strawberries got big and flavorless, commercial topping replaced real cream, and the sponge cake came frozen. Every piece of what made it good was swapped for something cheaper. Number 9. Cherry cobbler. Sweetened cherries poured into a baking dish, topped with a rough biscuit dough, and baked until the crust turned golden and the fruit bubbled up through the cracks. The cherries stained everything they touched: the dish, the spoon, the paper napkin, and nobody cared because the taste was worth the laundry. Diners served cobbler warm in shallow bowls with a scoop of vanilla ice cream that melted into the cherry juice and pooled at the bottom. During cherry season, the smell coming out of the kitchen was enough to sell this before people even opened the menu. When canned pie filling replaced fresh fruit, the cobbler turned into a different dessert entirely. The color was the same. The taste was not even close. The diner dessert was an honest transaction. You gave the cook $1 and she gave you something she made that morning with her own hands. No brand name on the plate, no marketing department behind the recipe, no focus group that decided what the filling should taste like. It was one person baking what she knew, and you trusting her every time you pointed at the case and said, "I will have that one." The chains replaced that exchange with consistency. Every slice identical in every city. But consistency is not quality, and the people who remember that old dessert case know the difference. Number 8. Icebox cake. Thin chocolate wafer cookies layered with sweetened whipped cream and refrigerated overnight until the cookies softened and merged with the cream into a sliceable loaf. No baking. The cook assembled it in the afternoon, put it in the icebox, and by morning it had turned into something that looked and cut like a cake, but had no flour, no eggs, and no oven time. The chocolate and cream layers created stripes when you sliced it. Diners loved this in summer when turning on the oven was the last thing anyone wanted. When the wafer cookies became harder to find, the cake followed them off the shelf. Number 7. Apple dumpling. A whole peeled apple wrapped in pie dough, filled with butter, cinnamon, and brown sugar where the core used to be, then baked in a pan with cinnamon syrup pooling around the bottom. The dough came out flaky and golden, and the apple inside went soft without falling apart. Diners in Pennsylvania and Ohio served these in deep bowls with the syrup ladled over and cold milk on the side. Each one was a single serving, and each one took real time to wrap by hand. Once the cook who knew how to fold the dough without tearing it retired, the dumpling retired with her. Number 6. Lemon meringue pie. Bright yellow lemon curd in a baked shell, topped with a meringue that stood 3 inches tall and browned under the broiler. This pie was the showpiece of the dessert case. Nothing else had that height, that color, or that contrast between sharp filling and sweet topping. The curd had to be cooked to the right thickness or it wept and pooled at the bottom of the slice. The meringue had to be sealed to the crust or it shrank from the edges. Every cook who made it well solved those problems by feel. You can still find lemon meringue in some diners today, but the meringue comes from a can and the filling from a powder. The one that needed a sharp eye at the broiler door is gone. Number 5. Banana split. A whole banana split lengthwise in an oblong dish, 3 scoops of ice cream down the center, chocolate on one, strawberry on another, pineapple on the third, then whipped cream, chopped nuts, and a cherry. The diner banana split was a production. The waitress carried it out on a tray, and every head turned to see who ordered it. This was not a quiet dessert. The dish was too long, the scoops were too tall, and the toppings were already sliding before it hit the table. Soda fountains served these as the grand finale, the one you ordered on your birthday or after a terrible week. The name still exists today, but the ceremony is gone. A modern banana split is soft serve from a machine in a paper boat. The spectacle left the building decades ago. Number 4. Baked Alaska. A dome of ice cream on a base of sponge cake, covered entirely in meringue, then placed under the broiler until the outside browned and crisped, while the ice cream inside stayed frozen. The physics amazed people. Hot on the outside, frozen on the inside, served before the whole thing collapsed. Diners that offered this treated it as a spectacle. The cook brought it out fast, and you ate it fast because the clock was running from the moment the meringue left the heat. By the 1970s, the risk outweighed the reward. Meringue catching fire, cooks sprinting from the kitchen, insurance questions nobody wanted to answer. Baked Alaska became a memory, and the diners that used to make a show of it quietly took it off the board. Number 3. Banana pudding. Vanilla wafer cookies layered with sliced bananas and warm vanilla custard, built up in a deep dish until the layers reached the top, then covered with meringue or whipped cream and chilled. In the South, banana pudding was not just a diner dessert, it was the dessert. Church suppers had it, family reunions had it. Every diner south of the Mason-Dixon line had a pan of it behind the glass, and regulars judged the whole restaurant by how good that pudding was. The custard was the foundation. Eggs, sugar, flour, milk, and vanilla cooked on the stove until it thickened enough to coat the back of a spoon. Then, the layering began. Wafer, banana, custard. Wafer, banana, custard. Each layer had to be built while the custard was still warm so the cookies softened properly. If the custard cooled too much, the wafers stayed crunchy and the whole thing tasted like a box of cookies with milk poured on top. The best versions had meringue browned in the oven, and the contrast between the cool pudding and the warm, toasted top was what separated real banana pudding from everything else in the case. Southern cooks argued about the details the way other people argued about politics. Whipped cream or meringue, ripe bananas or firm, homemade wafers or store-bought. Every choice was a declaration of where you came from. The diner version was always the best because the cook made it in the morning and it sat in the case all day, softening, the flavors melting into each other until the wafers and the custard and the bananas became one thing. That slow transformation was the whole secret, and you cannot rush it with a box of instant pudding. Today, banana pudding still exists everywhere, but the diner version, made fresh in a kitchen that smelled like warm vanilla and caramelizing sugar, has been replaced by instant mix and bananas that turn brown before the lunch rush ends. Number 2. Coconut cream pie. A baked pie shell filled with thick coconut custard, topped with whipped cream and a shower of toasted coconut. This was the dessert diner regulars pointed at through the glass without reading the menu. The custard was rich enough to coat your tongue, and the toasted coconut on top gave it a crunch that no other cream pie could match. Diner cooks toasted the flakes in a dry skillet until the edges went golden, and the smell was sweet and warm and unmistakable. A good coconut cream pie held together when you cut it. The slice stood up on the plate with clean edges and a custard that did not run. That took practice, and the cooks who got it right had gotten it wrong 100 times first. The pie still shows up on some menus, but the filling comes from a jug and the topping from a can. What used to be the crown of the dessert case is now the saddest thing in it. Number 1. Rice pudding. Cooked white rice stirred into milk, sugar, eggs, vanilla, and a pinch of cinnamon. Simmered low until the rice swelled and the liquid thickened into something between porridge and custard. This was the simplest dessert any diner ever served, and it was the one that mattered most. Rice pudding did not try to impress anyone. No meringue, no caramel, no chocolate, no crust. A bowl of sweetened rice in warm milk, and it tasted like the kitchen of someone who cared whether you ate today. Diners served it in small ceramic bowls with cinnamon on top, and it sat next to the flashier pies and the layered parfaits and outsold most of them. The people who ordered rice pudding were not looking for dessert. They were looking for a feeling. The feeling of being fed by someone who was not in a hurry and who never once asked you to leave when you were done. That is what a diner dessert was supposed to be. Texas sheet cake is renowned for its rich, fudgy icing and moist chocolate base, traditionally baked in a large, flat baking sheet. This cake is particularly noted for its method of pouring warm icing over the hot cake, allowing the icing to partially soak into the top layer of the cake, creating a uniquely moist texture. The traditional recipe uses everyday ingredients like flour, sugar, buttermilk, and cocoa. But the 1980s saw variations that included adding cinnamon or espresso powder to enhance the chocolate flavor. Additionally, the ease of preparation, often just mixing the wet and dry ingredients together, made it accessible for bakers of all skill levels. The cake's popularity was also supported by the widespread availability of high-quality cocoa powders and vanilla extracts, which were becoming more accessible and affordable. This next one is Jell-O salad, a dessert that combines flavored gelatin with mix-ins like canned fruit, shredded carrots, marshmallows, and even cottage cheese, just throwing a bunch of ingredients at each other. Traditionally, the gelatin was dissolved in hot water, mixed with the ingredients, and left to set in the fridge. Jell-O salad's roots go back to the mid-20th century when convenience foods became popular, but it truly hit its stride in the 70s. It was on every potluck and holiday table. Remember those kitschy commercials that were said to be fun and festive dishes? Despite the cheerful marketing, many secretly hated this jiggly creation. Who else remembers poking at it with a fork, trying to understand the mysterious bits? While it's a nostalgic trip down memory lane, Jell-O salad is one retro dessert that most of us are happy to leave in the past, with no regrets. Prune cake was one of those desserts people loved long before they ever admitted it. A moist, spiced treat that showed up on countless holiday tables thanks to its deep flavor and long shelf life. Grandmothers especially swore by it, calling it their secret weapon because it never dried out and always tasted better the next day. The prunes disappeared into the batter, lending sweetness and moisture without announcing themselves too boldly, and the spices wrapped everything in a warm, comforting aroma. It was a cake that stretched ingredients wisely, perfect for large families and tight budgets. Children would roll their eyes at the thought of prunes, but one bite of that sticky sweet crumb made them believers. It was a dessert born from practicality, the kind of treat that made the most of what people had on hand. But as times changed and holiday desserts became flashier, prune cake was left behind. It did not look glamorous, it did not have fancy toppings, and it did not fit the modern obsession with picture-perfect food. So it vanished, even though anyone who ever loved it can still taste it in their memory, a quiet classic forgotten but never truly gone. Lady Baltimore cake is an elegant dessert, featuring layers of delicate white cake filled with a mixture of chopped nuts, raisins, and figs, bound together by a light meringue-based frosting. This cake's origins are linked to the southern United States, where it was developed in the early 20th century. The preparation of this cake involves creating a fluffy white cake base using a traditional creaming method where sugar and butter are beaten until light and airy before eggs and flour are added. The filling, a rich concoction of dried fruits and nuts boiled in a sugar syrup, is then spread between the baked cake layers. The frosting, often a Swiss or Italian meringue, was perfected during this time to hold up better under various environmental conditions, ensuring the cake remained pristine and appealing for longer durations. Picture a rich steamed Christmas pudding, dense with dried fruits such as raisins, currants, and sultanas soaked in brandy or rum. It is enhanced with suet for richness and bound by dark brown sugar, breadcrumbs, and flour. Ever wonder why Christmas pudding is strictly reserved for Yuletide feasts? Well, its roots trace back centuries to medieval England. It was a symbol of wealth and prosperity. In the 1970s, families anticipated the lighting of the Christmas pudding, eager to find hidden charms and coins for luck. But despite the charm, the hidden charms in this thick, overly sweet treat can cause dental issues, making it hit or miss. Remember those festive packages that came with snowy landscapes and carolers? They couldn't hide the fact that many hated the obligatory bite of this heavy, fruit-laden relic. So it's no surprise that this dessert is one we're happy to leave in the past. Speaking of thick foods, rice pudding falls right under that list. Hummingbird cake was once a Thanksgiving showstopper, a towering southern dessert packed with banana, pineapple, and toasted nuts that made the whole room go quiet with the first slice. It tasted like sunshine and warmth even on the coldest holiday morning. Families made it because it felt generous, full of ingredients you saved for special occasions. The batter was thick and fragrant, spiced just enough to feel festive, and the cream cheese frosting wrapped everything in a soft, tangy sweetness. Every layer tasted like celebration. For years, it stood proudly among pies on Thanksgiving buffets, especially in the Deep South, Where hospitality meant feeding people with your best over time, though, it slipped into birthday parties and spring gatherings instead, pushed aside by pumpkin pies and chocolate desserts that dominated holiday tables. But those who grew up with hummingbird cake remember the joy of cutting into it, the way the fruit kept it moist for days, and how it felt like the dessert that understood the holiday best, abundant, warm, and made to share. A sweet memory worth keeping alive. The refrigerator cake, known for its no-bake convenience, consists of layers of crispy cookies softened by whipped cream or pudding to form a cohesive, cake-like texture. The 1980s brought innovation to this classic with the introduction of flavored whipped creams and diverse cookie varieties, transforming the traditional vanilla or chocolate profiles into more exotic flavors. The typical assembly involves a strategic layering of cookies alternated with generous amounts of cream, which is then left to set in the refrigerator until the cookies absorb moisture and meld together. During this period, advancements in refrigeration technology allowed for better temperature control, ensuring that the cakes set perfectly and maintained their structure when sliced. The potato chip cookies were made for people who can't decide if they want it sweet or salty. These cookies, made from butter, sugar, flour, and crushed potato chips, were staples at bake sales and potlucks. The preparation was simple. Mix the ingredients, form the dough into balls, flatten slightly, and bake until golden. The result was a cookie with a tender, buttery texture and a salty crunch. Despite their simplicity, these cookies were polarizing, with people either loving or loathing the salty-sweet combination. Did your family have a secret recipe for these because mine did? While they might be a quirky reminder of experimentation, potato chip cookies are one 70s treat most are happy to forget. Same with this beer float pie. Shoofly pie was a slice of Appalachian history wrapped in a layer of sticky molasses and crumb topping, a dessert born from frugality and resourcefulness. It was called shoofly because the sweet smell drew flies toward the table and cooks had to shoo them away as the pie cooled. Families made it because molasses was cheaper and easier to store than sugar, making it the perfect holiday ingredient for households that had more hard work than money. The pie baked into a deep, gooey layer at the bottom with a crumbly cake-like topping on top, creating a texture that felt both rustic and indulgent. Children loved it because it was sweet enough to feel forbidden, and adults enjoyed it because every bite tasted like the land they came from. Over time, as refined sugar became cheap and store-bought pies took over, shoofly pie disappeared from most homes. It was too regional, too old-fashioned, too simple to compete with newer holiday desserts, but the people who remember it still talk about it with a quiet pride. It was a dessert that told a story, and every slice tasted a little like history. Sock It To Me cake, a rich, buttery coffee cake filled with a ribbon of cinnamon, brown sugar, and pecans, became popular in the late 1960s and continued its popularity into the 1980s. This cake is based on a basic yellow cake mix, which is enhanced with sour cream to add moisture and density. The Sock It To Me filling is swirled into the batter, and the cake is typically topped with a simple glaze. In the 1980s, the cake became a favorite for its easy preparation and delicious results, often appearing in brand advertising for cake mixes as a prime example of how home bakers could create bakery-quality cakes at home. The ease of customization by adding different nuts or fruits, or even adapting the sugar mix to include flavors like maple, made it a versatile recipe that home bakers enjoyed experimenting with. Next is a hot dog and marshmallow casserole. Okay, combining hot dogs and marshmallows in a dessert was as bad as it sounds. This casserole was made with sliced hot dogs, mini marshmallows, canned pineapple chunks, and a sweet glaze made from brown sugar and mustard. The oddly sweet and savory concoction was layered and baked until everything melded together. The dessert likely emerged during the 70s era of experimental recipes. Most families that served these got side eyes. Despite the novelty, this dish was more a conversation piece than a delight. How many of you would dare serve this today? Thankfully, hot dog and marshmallow casserole is an experiment that now belongs to the past. Cranberry pudding with hard sauce was one of those desserts that looked humble on the outside but carried a surprising punch once you cut into it. This steamed pudding was dense, tart, and beautifully old-fashioned, the kind of dish families made before ovens were common in every home. The cranberries gave it a deep ruby color and a sharpness that cut through the heaviness of a Thanksgiving meal, and it always arrived at the table warm enough to fog up the windows. But the real magic came from the hard sauce, a thick mixture of butter, sugar, and a touch of something strong enough to make everyone at the table raise their eyebrows just a bit. When you dolloped it over the pudding, it melted slowly, seeping into every corner and creating a flavor no modern dessert can truly imitate. Families made this because it felt festive, grown up, and cozy all at once, a dessert that lit up the room even without frosting or decorations. Over time, the steaming process fell out of fashion, and people traded long cooking times for convenience. Microwaves replaced kettles, boxed mixes replaced handwritten recipes, and the pudding slipped quietly into obscurity. But the truth is, a dessert like this was never about convenience. It was about gathering in the kitchen, checking the pot, waiting together, and finally sharing something warm and indulgent on a cold holiday night, a forgotten classic, but one with a heart that has never really disappeared. Lemon meringue pie is a classic American dessert consisting of a crisp pastry shell filled with rich lemon custard and topped with a fluffy toasted meringue. The pie's origins can be traced back to the 19th century, but it was in the 1980s that its preparation saw significant refinement. Key to the pie's structure is the stability of the meringue, which in the 1980s benefited greatly from advancements in oven technology that allowed for more precise temperature control, crucial for achieving the perfect meringue. Food science innovations during this time also introduced more reliable cornstarch-based thickeners, which ensured the lemon filling was consistently firm and glossy. Another significant enhancement was the development of more durable and decorative pie dishes that went directly from oven to table, which helped maintain the aesthetic quality of the pie. I don't know who thought this was a great idea, but mayonnaise cake combines creamy mayo with cake batter, promising a tender crumb and rich flavor. The cake is made by combining typical cake ingredients like flour, sugar, eggs, and cocoa powder. The twist comes with the addition of mayonnaise, which replaces the need for butter or oil, providing the necessary fats and moisture. The mayo is mixed with water and vanilla extract before being added to the dry ingredients. Homemakers loved it for its convenience and clever kitchen shortcut. Despite its moist texture, the idea of mayo in a cake was off-putting to many. Manufacturers marketed mayo as the secret to baking perfection, but let's be honest, the concept left a lot to be desired. While it's a nostalgic nod to culinary creativity, mayonnaise cake is one 70s dessert that most are happy to leave behind. Did anyone else's family try this unusual treat? No shades to the inventor, but I have the same feeling about mincemeat pie. Apple pandowdy was the rustic cousin of all the fancier apple desserts, a dish that did not care about looks or presentation and still managed to win every heart at the table. It began with sliced apples simmered with cinnamon, butter, and a touch of brown sugar until the whole house smelled like the inside of an orchard. Instead of laying a perfect crust over the top, cooks would break pieces of dough and scatter them unevenly, letting the edges sink into the bubbling fruit as it baked. The juices caramelized around the dough, turning each little piece into something crisp, chewy, and irresistible. This was a dessert for families who valued flavor over perfection, people who understood that the best dishes are sometimes the messiest. Children loved it because it felt fun, like a dessert that broke the rules, and adults loved it because it tasted like the orchard harvest served straight from the pan. But as crisps and cobblers became more popular and easier to sell in bakeries, the pandowdy quietly slipped away. Its uneven top was not camera-ready, and its old-fashioned name did not help it survive in a modern world. Still, anyone who ever ate it fresh from the oven remembers the way it tasted like fall itself, a forgotten treasure hiding in plain sight. Bread pudding traditionally utilizes stale bread, milk, eggs, sugar, and spices like cinnamon or nutmeg, transforming basic leftovers into a sumptuous dessert. The custard base is created by whisking together eggs and sugar, to which milk or cream is added, along with vanilla for flavor. The stale bread is soaked in this mixture until it becomes saturated, then baked until the custard sets and the top turns golden. Originating from 11th century Europe as a means to use up stale bread, the dish evolved significantly by the 1980s, incorporating richer ingredients like brioche or challah. During this period, culinary enthusiasts began adding luxury elements such as chocolate chips, bourbon-soaked raisins, or layers of fresh fruit like apples or pears to enhance the flavor profile. Moreover, the introduction of double cream in the custard mixture became popular for its ability to add a velvety richness, contrasting beautifully with the crispy caramelized top that becomes a highlight of the well-baked surface. Who could forget the polarizing taste of anise cookies? They were made from simple ingredients like flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and a generous amount of anise extract or seeds. Traditionally, they were mixed, rolled out, cut into festive shapes, and baked to a light, crispy perfection. While they became a holiday staple among European immigrant families in the U.S., many kids found these cookies the least appealing on the plate. Did your family have an anise cookie recipe passed down from great-grandma? But their strong licorice taste isn't for everyone. It's no wonder these cookies are more of a memory than a modern-day favorite. We left the old and fell in love with new stuff, and there's no going back. Mincemeat pie was once the crown jewel of Thanksgiving, the kind of dessert that could stop you in your tracks because the house filled with the smell of spice, fruit, and something warm that felt older than memory. People forget that mincemeat was not just a pie. It was a ritual built slowly with dried apples, raisins, sweet, cloves, and whatever a family saved for the holiday. It was about turning humble ingredients into something that tasted like celebration even when times were thin. Grandmothers made it by instinct, each slice slightly different depending on the year's harvest. Kids wrinkled their noses at the idea of sweat, but one bite of that sticky, rich filling turned anyone into a believer. It demanded patience and trust in the old ways, which is why it faded once canned fillings and pre-made pies appeared. The world sped up, and mincemeat pie did not fit into a life lived in a hurry. Today, most people have never tasted it at all, but anyone who makes it from scratch understands why older generations fought to keep the recipe alive. Dense, spiced, comforting, and bold, it held on to tradition even as the world changed. Coffee cakes have a rich history, with their origins in European baked goods that were transformed in the American culinary scene into a versatile cake enjoyed alongside coffee. In the 1980s, these cakes often featured a variety of ingredients such as cinnamon, nuts, and fruit fillings, with a crumbly streusel topping as a signature element. The batter typically includes flour, sugar, eggs, and sour cream or buttermilk, which contributes to its moist texture. The innovation of adding sour cream in the batter during the 1980s was particularly notable, as it helped keep the cake moist longer without needing artificial preservatives. Coffee cakes were frequently used as a testing ground for flavor combinations, incorporating ingredients like blueberries or apples, which were particularly abundant in the U.S. during this decade due to agricultural advancements. It's exactly what you think. It looks like something quite close to ice cream, but made with rice. So, what's the secret behind this creamy concoction? It all starts with a cup of rice simmered in milk until it reaches a heavenly consistency. Add a sprinkle of spice and a dash of sweetness, and you've got rice pudding. In the 1970s, families loved it as a budget-friendly meal, perfect for stretching ingredients. Its versatility made it a star in both sweet and savory dishes. But many found it bland and mushy, with a texture that could be likened to baby food. Its consistency and lack of flavor left many unimpressed and unsatisfied. Some of us really don't care if it was Grandma's favorite thing to make. We are happy to leave it right where it belongs, right there alongside mayonnaise cake. Sweet potato custard was the quiet soul of Thanksgiving long before sweet potato pie stole the spotlight, a silky baked dish that tasted like home even in uncertain years. Families loved it because it was simple and comforting, made with sweet potatoes, milk, spices, and a steady hand. It came from an older style of cooking that relied on patience rather than tools. When it came from the oven, lightly set and fragrant, its sweetness came from the vegetable itself instead of handfuls of sugar. Adults swore it softened even the hardest winners. But as shortcuts and store-bought pies took over, the custard was pushed aside as too plain or old-fashioned. People forgot that its simplicity was exactly its charm. No crust, no excess, just a warm, velvety dessert that felt like a hug on a cold evening. Today it appears mostly in memories and fading recipe cards, but reviving it once is enough to understand why it mattered. Angel Food Cake, a staple in American baking, is known for its distinctive light, fluffy texture attributed to its unique ingredient list that includes no fat, only egg whites, sugar, flour, and cream of tartar. This cake's origins trace back to the United States in the late 19th century, gaining popularity as a food of the angels due to its airy lightness. By the 1980s, it became synonymous with health-conscious dessert choices because of its low-fat content. Innovations in baking technology, particularly the widespread availability of electric mixers, made the process of whipping egg whites less daunting, contributing to its popularity. Interestingly, the cake's simple base became a canvas for a variety of flavor additions, from almond extract to citrus zests, allowing it to adapt to various taste preferences over the decades. It sounds like meat pie, but meat is not the star ingredient. Rather, it's made from spiced fruits and sweet, sometimes with a hint of meat. Historically, mincemeat pies trace their origins to medieval England and originally contained real meat. The preparation back then involved finely chopping beef or mutton and mixing it with a variety of dried fruits like raisins, currants, and apples, along with spices such as cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. Suet, beef or mutton fat, was added for richness, and the mixture was soaked in brandy or another liquor to enhance the flavor. This blend was then left to mature, allowing the flavors to meld together before being encased in a pastry crust and baked. But by the 70s, the meat was mostly gone, but the name stuck. Who remembers those ads claiming these pies were just like grandma's? Some people may miss it, but we can all agree that the mixture was overly rich and oddly textured. Did anyone else ever wonder why this pie still lingers on holiday tables? Maybe it's time to leave this peculiar dessert in the past where it belongs. Pumpkin chiffon pie was the lighter, softer cousin of the traditional pumpkin pie, a dessert so airy it felt like eating a sweet autumn cloud. It became popular when cooks wanted something elegant but not too heavy after a long day of holiday eating, and chiffon pies were considered the height of sophistication. Instead of the dense custard people are used to today, pumpkin chiffon pie relied on whipped egg whites folded carefully into a spiced pumpkin mixture, creating a silky filling that floated inside its crust. Families loved it because it felt special, almost fancy, even when the ingredients were simple and inexpensive. Mothers would make it the night before Thanksgiving so it had time to set, and children would sneak into the refrigerator just to poke at the trembling surface. But when canned pumpkin fillings and pre-made pies started taking over in grocery stores, chiffon pies faded fast. The delicate preparation did not fit into a world rushing toward convenience. People forgot the feeling of lifting a slice that barely weighed anything, of tasting pumpkin in a way that felt light instead of heavy. The pie disappeared, replaced by versions that were simpler but far less magical. Still, anyone who ever tasted a homemade pumpkin chiffon pie will tell you that nothing has matched its airy charm since. In a holiday built on tradition, it remains one of the sweetest losses. The pineapple upside-down cake, a staple of American baking since the early 20th century, experienced a notable resurgence in the 1980s. Characterized by its caramelized pineapple and cherry topping, the cake's preparation begins with a layer of sliced pineapples and cherries at the bottom of the pan, covered by a rich batter that, once baked and inverted, reveals a colorful and enticing design. The availability of canned pineapples and the affordability of baking ingredients during the 1980s contributed to the cake's popularity. Innovations in non-stick bakeware during the 1980s also facilitated the cake's preparation, ensuring that the aesthetic appeal of the caramelized top was preserved upon inversion. The pineapple upside-down cake not only served as a delicious treat, but also as a canvas for culinary creativity. with many bakers experimenting with different types of fruit and spices to create unique variations of the classic recipe. This next dessert is the notorious liver ice cream. Yes, you heard that right. This bizarre 70s creation combined liver with the creamy delight of ice cream. Made from liver puree, sugar, cream, and sometimes a dash of brandy or vanilla, this dessert was an acquired taste, to say the least. The preparation involved blending the liver into a smooth paste, mixing it with the other ingredients and churning it like regular ice cream. It started as a trend in the 70s that embraced experimental and questionable flavors. Unfortunately, liver ice cream quickly fell out of favor. It was a disastrous attempt to combine savory and sweet. But in the end, the unsettling flavor mix of liver and ice cream left most people cringing and questioning the culinary experiment. Can you imagine the shock of finding liver in your dessert? Although they claimed it was healthy, even the most daring eaters found this oddity hard to swallow. It's safe to say this is one 70s dessert we're happy to leave behind. Date nut roll was the kind of dessert that made children hover anxiously around the kitchen, waiting for the moment it was sliced. It was not a pie or a cake, but a refrigerator candy, rolled by hand and packed with sweet dates, nuts, and just enough cookie crumbs to hold everything together. Families made it weeks before the holiday, storing it away in wax paper like treasure hidden in the back of the fridge. When you sliced it, the spirals of sticky fruit and crunchy nuts made every piece look like a tiny stained glass window, and the taste was just as memorable. It was sweet without being overwhelming, rich without being heavy, and easy to stretch for a crowd when money was tight. Making it was a labor of love, requiring time and patience that people no longer make space for. As store-bought candy boxes and pre-made sweets filled the shelves, the roll faded away, seen as too old-fashioned or too fiddly for modern kitchens, but back then it symbolized celebration, care, and the quiet excitement of a holiday dessert pulled from a cold shelf on a chilly evening. A little forgotten maybe, but never undeserving of its place at the table. The chocolate mayonnaise cake, a novel yet beloved dessert, makes ingenious use of mayonnaise to replace traditional fat components like butter or oil. This cake's recipe typically combines unsweetened cocoa powder, sugar, and flour with mayonnaise, which adds moisture and richness to the cake without imparting a mayonnaise flavor. First coming into prominence during World War II due to rationing, this cake remained popular into the 1980s for its moist texture and deep chocolate flavor. The preparation involves simple mixing techniques, with mayonnaise added to the wet ingredients before combining with the dry, creating a batter that is notably smooth and easy to work with. Moreover, food manufacturers began to market mayonnaise specifically for its use in cakes during this period, highlighting its ability to create exceptionally moist desserts. Next up, we have the cornflake tart, a 70s dessert that brought the crunch of breakfast cereal to the table. This tart features a short-crust pastry base filled with a sticky mixture of golden syrup, butter, and sugar, topped with crunchy cornflakes. The preparation involved baking the pastry shell, pouring in the warm syrup mixture, and sprinkling the cornflakes on top before popping it back in the oven. While it was a school dinner classic in the UK, loved for its sugary hit and satisfying crackle, its sheer sugar overload made it a tooth-achingly sweet treat. Not to mention that it often resulted in sticky, hard-to-clean baking pans. Did anyone else have this as a childhood favorite? Well, you're grown now and wise, and you know that all that sugar is not good for you. This crunchy, sticky dessert is best enjoyed in small doses, if at all. Butterscotch pie was the kind of dessert that made people stop mid-conversation when it was carried to the table, its glossy meringue peaks and golden filling catching the light in a way no one could ignore. The magic started on the stovetop, where sugar and butter melted together to create a deep caramel flavor that filled the kitchen with warmth. Once the mixture thickened into a silky custard, it was poured into a flaky crust and crowned with a cloud of meringue. Families loved it because it felt luxurious without being expensive, a dessert that tasted like a special occasion even on ordinary days. During the holidays, butterscotch pie was always one of the first things to disappear, with children fighting over the corner slices where the meringue browned just a little more. But as boxed pudding mixes and frozen pies became household staples, this stovetop masterpiece faded out. No one wanted to stand over a pot stirring carefully, watching for that perfect moment when the custard thickened. The world got busier, and the pie slipped quietly into memory. Yet anyone who tasted it fresh will tell you that nothing made with shortcuts ever came close, a lost masterpiece of sweetness and tradition. Coconut cream pie is distinguished by its creamy, custard-like filling that blends eggs, sugar, and coconut milk, poured into a flaky pastry crust and topped with whipped cream and toasted coconut flakes. The pie's traditional recipe was enhanced in the 1980s with the introduction of high-quality coconut milk, which provided a richer coconut flavor and smoother custard consistency. The pie crust is typically pre-baked, a technique known as blind baking, to prevent it from becoming soggy once the wet filling is added. Innovations during the 1980s included the use of shredded coconut in the crust itself, adding texture and reinforcing the coconut flavor throughout the dessert. Food science played a role in improving the stability of the whipped cream toppings with the development of longer-lasting, stiffer whipped cream formulations, which kept the pies looking fresher for longer periods. But nothing said, cringe as loudly as this next dessert. It's called grasshopper pie. This no-bake pie combined a chocolate cookie crust and a filling of whipped cream, marshmallow fluff, and crème de menthe, giving it that unmistakable minty flavor and color. Preparation was simple. Mix the marshmallow and crème de menthe, fold in the whipped cream, pour into the crust, and chill. Grasshopper pie peaked in popularity in the 70s thanks to its striking appearance and ease of preparation. Despite the hype, its overly sweet and minty flavor gave it many one-star reviews. So they had to go. And why was it even named after an insect? Yuck! Orange slice cake was a holiday surprise wrapped inside a dessert, dense and chewy with bursts of candied orange that lit up every bite. People loved making it because it felt playful, different from the usual pies and puddings. The chopped orange candy slices melted slightly in the oven, blending with nuts, coconut, and a rich batter to create a texture unlike anything else on the table. Children always recognized the taste immediately, since those little orange candies were a rare treat any other time of year. Families baked this cake weeks in advance because the flavor deepened as it sat, becoming richer and more complex with every passing day. It was the kind of dessert that made people smile before they even tasted it. But as candy companies changed their recipes and holiday traditions shifted towards simpler desserts, orange slice cake faded away. It was too old-fashioned, too sweet, too heavy for modern tastes, and eventually it disappeared from cookbooks and memories alike. Still, for anyone who grew up eating it, the flavor remains unforgettable. A cheerful dessert from a different time. The 7-layer cake, or rainbow cake, impresses with its vibrant, multicolored appearance. Each of the 7 thin sponge layers dyed a different color and separated by a thin layer of chocolate or jam. Originating from Europe, this cake became popular in American bakeries, especially within Eastern European immigrant communities. The cake's preparation is meticulous, involving the precise measurement and coloring of batter for each layer, followed by careful baking to ensure each layer remains uniformly thin and moist. The 1980s saw advancements in food dye quality, which offered brighter, more fade-resistant colors, making the layers visually striking without affecting the flavor. The fillings between the layers also evolved during this time, with variations including apricot, raspberry, and even mint jams becoming popular. And to the dessert, that often turned out wrong. Forgotten cookies were made from egg whites, sugar, vanilla, and chocolate chips. These meringue cookies were baked by whipping the egg whites and sugar, folding in the chips, and leaving them in a preheated oven that was turned off. This method promised a perfect cookie, but often resulted in inconsistent textures, from too dry to too chewy. Cookies are supposed to be nice, aren't they? But forgotten cookies had other plans. Its name is mostly because you could forget them in the oven and they'd turn out nice. But now, we want to end this toxic relationship. While they hold a special place in retro dessert lore, forgotten cookies are one treat many are happy to forget. Coconut custard pie was the quiet heartbeat of Southern holiday tables, a dessert that won people over without needing decoration or fuss. It came from the simplest ingredients: eggs, milk, sugar, shredded coconut, and vanilla. As it baked, the custard settled low while the coconut rose and turned golden, creating a pie that tasted warm and familiar. Families loved it because it brought sunshine to a cold season and reminded them of childhood afternoons. It showed up at potlucks and Thanksgiving dinners long before more elaborate desserts became popular. Older cooks trusted it because it never failed, even in lean years. But as store-bought pies and trendier flavors crowded the table, this humble favorite faded. People forgot how satisfying a soft custard and toasted coconut could be. Still, in homes where old recipes survive, this pie remains a gentle reminder of slower holidays and simple comfort. Lord Baltimore cake, a counterpart to the more famous Lady Baltimore cake, features layers of yellow cake filled with a rich mixture of crushed nuts, dried fruits, and sometimes rum or brandy. This cake was particularly noted for its fruity, boozy filling, which set it apart as a more robust option compared to its delicate counterpart. Originating from the southern United States, its preparation involves creating a moist, buttery yellow cake base, which is then layered with the fruit and nut mixture. The 1980s brought innovations such as using macerated fruits in the filling, enhancing the moisture and flavor of the cake, and introducing different types of nuts for a varied texture. This dessert was often covered with a simple glaze or a light frosting, which was sometimes flavored with citrus to cut through the richness of the filling. The root beer float pie did not have to ever be made. It combined root beer and vanilla ice cream into a chilled, creamy concoction. Made by blending root beer concentrate with vanilla pudding mix and whipped topping, then pouring it into a graham cracker crust and freezing it, the pie tasted just like a root beer float. It was popular for summer barbecues and birthday parties, and even the ads claimed it was refreshing and easy preparation. Despite its charm, the intense root beer flavor was too much for many. I mean, if I wanted to drink herbs, I'd just do so, right? The artificial root beer flavor often overwhelmed the senses. Plus, its frothy texture sometimes felt like eating foam, making it less enjoyable than a real float. Root beer float pie is a dessert many are happy to leave in the past. Pumpkin roll with cream cheese filling was the pride of holiday bakers in the 1970s and 1980s, a dessert that quietly proved who had real confidence in the kitchen. It was never something you could rush. You baked the thin pumpkin cake just right, warm enough to roll but cool enough not to tear, then wrapped it in a sugared towel so it held its shape. Families watched mothers and grandmothers handle it like a fragile secret, knowing a single mistake meant starting over. When the cream cheese filling was spread across the unrolled cake, the whole kitchen filled with vanilla and spice. Rolling it back up brought a moment of suspense before those perfect spirals appeared later on the cutting board. But desserts with shortcuts slowly replaced it, and fewer people wanted to spend an afternoon coaxing a thin sheet of cake into behaving. Still, those who tasted it remember the soft pumpkin sponge, the cool, tangy filling, and the feeling that this dessert was part skill and part celebration. That glass case used to be the first thing you saw when you walked in and the last thing you thought about on the drive home. If any of these brought back a memory, hold on to it. Better yet, make one. A bread pudding from stale bread, a butterscotch pudding from real brown sugar, an apple dumpling wrapped in dough you rolled yourself. It does not have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. If your mother or your grandmother or the cook at your corner diner made one of these, tell me the name of the dessert and the name of the place in the comments. And if you want more of this, hit subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. I am James, and I will see you in the next video.